everyone, Michelle Seidling here with another episode of Food Experience Unplugged. Today we're exploring the role of food and wellness on mental health. Here to help us do that is Helen Ginman, the founder of Unique and Inclusive Wellbeing, that focuses on the promotion of positive mental health and wellness in the workplace. This podcast is available on multiple platforms, including YouTube, Apple Podcast, Spotify, and others, as well as our website at foodexperienceunplugged.com. Please be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform for new content as it becomes available. Please also check out our website at foodexperienceunplugged.com for some free resources as you begin your health journey. Helen Ginman, welcome to Food Experience Unplugged.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited.
Well, we are excited to have you and talking about, you are one of the premier specialists with mental health in the workplace.
Yeah,
and it's super excited to have you and talking about the importance of food and wellness on mental health. And that's super important. Right. To start out with, will you introduce yourself for a few minutes and just what brought you to this point? Why this focus on mental health?
Sure. So I work with companies primarily to help them create organizations where their employees thrive. Ultimately, I'm trying to help businesses recognize what influence they have over creating poor mental health. Every part of our life has the opportunity to affect us. We all go through different situations and different circumstances, and we spend a lot of time in work. So work will naturally play a part in affecting how we feel. So I help companies to recognize the influence they have in that area, but also what they can do to try and prevent poor mental health from happening and to better support those people who do struggle. So if we have people in our organization that are affected by mental illness, what role businesses can play in better supporting those people to ultimately keep them in work and keep them being able to navigate through, but mostly to get them the help that perhaps they need. And in addition to that, I also work with communities and primarily through the arts, so things like theatre and using music to really creatively be able to bring alive how people are feeling, because when we're creative, we have the ability to articulate a little bit better perhaps how we're feeling. So it's a nice intervention, a gentle intervention for people to find a different way of exploring how they're feeling. So I have the best of both worlds, being able to work with the businesses as well as the community. And I think, arriving at this moment, I've worked in the corporate world for a very long time as a senior leader, and I've seen firsthand the impact that businesses can have on individuals, through their decision making, through their relationships that they build with employees, through their processes, through things that they do that they could do differently. And myself, I've gone through my own personal journey with poor mental health. I've suffered from anxiety since I was 11. And I recovered from that, but what was left behind was depression, and I suffered for a lot of my life with depression. I attempted taking my life twice, failed. I'm still here, thankfully. And I've been through some of those darkest moments, and I just don't want people to feel like they're ever alone. And lots of people are currently struggling in the darkness, not sure where to go to, how to get the help that they perhaps need. Maybe don't even feel like they can ask for help. And I just thought, I don't want anyone to suffer in that way, in the same way that I did, and in different ways. So I now combine my own personal experience with, thinking about it from a business perspective and saying we need to create these environments where people don't feel afraid or embarrassed that they can't raise their hand and ask for help. That's where I've arrived at today.
That is amazing. I love your journey, through your own experiences and then paying it forward to help organizations and individuals. That's fantastic.
Yeah, and I mean, it's just such a massive crisis. And of course, we've had the COVID-19, or we're going through COVID-19 as a pandemic right now, and I know the aftermath of that is going to be poor mental health. People that have suffered, whether that's through being made redundant from their job, whether that's they've been impacted because one of their family members or their friends have unfortunately died as a result of it. We're all suffering in lots of different ways, and I think there'll be a big impact on mental health. And there already was before COVID, It's going to be much worse long before it. And I look at the statistics, and it's and I read that every 40 seconds somebody's taking their own life through suicide globally. Every
Oh,
40
wow.
seconds. So, if we spend half an hour together, do the maths, and there's quite a few people that have already taken their life in that short space of time, on top of lots of people who are thinking about it, and perhaps even lots of people that are attempting. So, it's a very, very real issue and a very real crisis that we really have to get our hands around to better support people who are in that state of mind.
Yes. And are you seeing that, with the COVID, are you seeing a lot of people suffering it with your own clientele or with organizations who are trying to deal with that?
Yeah, definitely kind of the anxiety, the fear of the uncertainty, worry. Businesses are starting to come back online now. The economy is starting to open up a little bit more, particularly in the UK. People are, worried about whether or not they're going to still catch COVID-19 and whether or not the workplace is safe. So, lots of people are dealing with different situations, different circumstances, and businesses are trying to deal with the variety or the variance, if you like, of different people's situations and circumstances. A lot of the schools, for example, still remain closed for us right now. So parents are trying to homeschool their children whilst trying to work, whilst trying to cook, whilst trying to clean, whilst trying to do everything else. So there's a huge amount of pressure being placed on people right now, and I don't see that pressure releasing very much over the next couple of months, as we still contend with the fallout from the pandemic.
Good point. Now, do you feel like organizations are dealing with different aspects of mental health that may not have been present, before COVID, or is it many of the same situations?
Yeah, the most common mental illnesses are anxiety and depression. We include stress into it. It's not a specific illness, but we recognise kind of its own impact in its own right, if you like. And they tend to be the three that I focus on in the majority of cases, because I know that we all have different degrees of feelings associated to those. Sometimes we feel sad, sometimes we feel down, sometimes we don't have the energy that we need, sometimes we do feel a little bit anxious, or we get a little bit nervous, or we get a little bit of sweaty palms. We're all seeing different signs and symptoms, what would typically come under those definitions of depression, anxiety and stress. So I think it's important that businesses recognize that people will fluctuate kind of on this continuum, if you like, of mental health, and will experience different days and bad days and good days and a mixture of both. But more companies I work with are thinking more broadly around mental ill health. So they're thinking about kind of psychosis and bipolar and some of those types of illnesses, or less frequent, but also post-traumatic stress disorder, I think will be something that businesses think about a little bit more, because many people will have gone through, in some instances, some quite horrific circumstances and situations that we have to respond to. Some of our nurses, our doctors, our healthcare supporters, some of those that are looking after our care homes will have had to experience very challenging circumstances.
That's true. That's an excellent point, and that's just probably a lot more taxing mentally than you would in a normal situation, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely. You're seeing people die. You know,
Mhm.
in the UK, we had over 25,000 deaths from care homes. People felt they didn't have control over what was happening. They didn't feel that they could influence a positive outcome. And I think we underestimate that impact that could have, and seeing some of those cases and situations that they've had to contend with. So I think post-traumatic stress disorder will be something that comes into play.
That's a good point. Excellent. Yes. Now, how does mental health, you primarily are in the workplace, but how does mental health really affect their decisions, their goals, whether they're in the workplace or they're at home with their family? How does that, I'm sure it affects different people in different ways.
For sure. It can affect absolutely everything in our life. Particularly when we are really in the deep of our mental illness. It can affect even our ability to get up in the morning. To be able to put clothes on, to be able to shower. It has this unique ability to totally invade lives. But it can also be subtle. So it could be like a little niggle away all the time. Some people are really highly functioning, particularly perhaps in their work life, but that when they get home, it's a different type of person. And although eventually those situations will come to a head, and eventually your body will tell you that it can't carry on trying to be highly functional in one part of your life and really suffer in the other. So people will be affected in different ways. People might not be able to go outside. People might not be able to do a task list, to run chores, to be able to go and do the shopping. Some people might not be able to work. There's lots of different things that mental illness will do that can stop, and it has this ability to kind of drain energy, and how that drains energy will affect people in different ways.
Good point. I love that you kind of cover the gamut of a range of different experiences, and really how to help them to really to regain their focus.
Yeah, I mean, if I think about my own experience, I think about it, and when I was recovering from depression, on my kind of final journey with recovering, I remember saying to my counsellor at the time, it's like I can see the world in colour. Because for so long, it didn't feel bright in the world. It felt dark, it felt grey. And although it wasn't physically those colours, in my head, that's how I perceived it. And I remember, having kind of those moments where I was getting better and sitting outside and going, oh my God, the grass is really green. Look how bright the sky is. And it was like I was being reawakened again into the world. It was an incredibly moving experience. And I just didn't realise how much it had consumed kind of every part of my life in that respect. But it was wonderful to be able to just waken up a little bit and see the world in colour again, and find your voice, or be able to interact in your social life, and or all of those different things. And I think finding your way through those things can be so magical at the end of it.
Yes, I love that. That's fantastic that you really kind of had a change in perspective, or an opening up in your perspective.
Yeah, exactly that. And you get those moments, particularly when you're on your own journey from recovery. You get those aha moments. You get those moments and go, wow, actually, this is what life has, and I've been missing it, or I've missed out on some of it, or I've been hiding away, or I've been struggling, or whatever it is. And you get those moments, and you're like, wow, this is life. I love this.
That is fantastic. Now, in the journey, getting to that point, now how does food and wellness, how does it play a role in mental health?
So, everything we do has the ability to affect our lives, every situation, every event. So understandably, so will food influence how we feel. And I think food has the real ability to affect our energy. I know from my own experience, even now, even though I don't suffer from mental illness anymore, I know that if I have too many carbs in one day, it really affects my energy and how tired I am. I know that I will nap and have an afternoon nap when I've eaten too many carbs, because my body's like on overload for tiredness. It doesn't want to do anything. It doesn't want to go out. It doesn't want to do any physical exercise. So I think, I recognize that in myself, that it doesn't. So I don't eat too many of them, because I know how much of an impact it's going to have. And there is this relationship between kind of obesity and depression, kind of that overeating. It's quite a complex relationship, and it's not kind of clear cut. But when we respond to situations that are happening, so when we're experiencing signs of anxiety, and one of those symptoms may well be that we undereat. One of those things may well be that we overeat. So we're eating far too much than we need to be eating. And when those things happen, it can send us on a different path that we spiral into different places with. So if we overeat, it can be a trigger for us to start feeling a little bit more conscious about our body and our body image and how we feel about those things. If we undereat, of course, we're not getting the nutrition that our bodies need. We're not getting our immune system's going to be suffering as a result of those not getting the right nutrition in our body. So it can really have a catastrophic effect. And it's almost like, once you respond to what's happening in your life and you go to your food for whatever it is you go for, whether that's overeating or undereating, it can then trigger this catastrophic event dependent on the circumstances. I know that kind of things like high high levels of saturated fats and refined carbs, that's been linked to poor mental health in children and particularly in adolescents. So there is definitely a relationship there between food and our health. We know it affects our physical health. Um, there's less research around its mental health and less psychological research. However, I think it's intrinsically linked with how we're responding to different situations in our life. And as a result of that, that does feed what happens next.
Interesting. Now, do you feel, is it kind of almost a reciprocal relationship? Your current mental situation may affect what you take in or with regard to food and wellness and vice versa?
Yeah, definitely. So, if you're feeling really low and you're demotivated and you're not finding the energy to be able to do anything, you're probably not going to have the energy or motivation to cook yourself a nutritious meal. You're probably going to go, maybe you'll grab a sandwich, maybe you're going to go to some sort of processed food, maybe you're going to shove something in the microwave that's got loads of sugar in it. You're going to look for something that's really quick, really simple, and just eat it quickly. Maybe you don't even do that. Maybe you just go and binge on crisps, or chocolate or something like that. So, if you haven't got that motivation and that energy, absolutely, you might resort to some of those things. Whereas when you're full of energy and your health is really positive, actually you might feel energized by cooking something lovely, in the evening, full of vegetables, having lots of fruit. Maybe it's really jam packed with some of the stuff that you really love. So I think it does affect that, and it is that vice versa reciprocal relationship that goes on there.
Excellent. Wow, that's super, super important. And so, how now you work with, work with businesses, organizations. How do you address that aspect of food and wellness as they're trying to help their employees?
Yeah, I mean, there's some businesses that have kind of canteens or cafes on site that are offering food. So one of the things I talk about is the variety of choice.
Mhm.
So, are they offering that variety that somebody can pick? So now we kind of have vegans, we have the vegetarians, all different types of food types, if you like. Are we catering for those varieties? But if I go into, let's say I go into a train station and I go up to the machine I can put my money in and get some food, I can pretty much get some crisps, some chocolate, or some fizzy drinks. I can't really get anything else. So if I'm hungry and I want to eat something, I'm going to get something that's not very good for me. Yeah, okay, we all want a treat. But so one of the things I work with people on is creating that choice. Now, I'm not an expert in nutrition, so the specifics that go in those things, but actually one of the first things is, what are you offering to your staff right now? What's available to them from a nutrition? What are you doing to encourage people to kind of create that balanced diet? And I think some of the behavior that businesses have should be adapted to be able to suit those things. So things like, I don't agree with a working lunch. I think people should be able to take their lunch break and find their time to be able to eat the food that they've cooked before and prepared for, or go and make their food in the kitchen that's available. Whereas, if you're expecting your staff to come back after 5 minutes, or you're not allowing them to take their lunch break at all, they're not going to be encouraged to kind of find that balanced diet. So I think, the relationship with food, with businesses is very much, what are you making accessible to staff if you have your own on-site cafe and access to food? What are you doing to raise awareness around nutrition and the balanced diet that people need to have, and what are you encouraging from that perspective?
Mm. Excellent. That sounds really, really good to just kind of broaden their options of what they can offer to their client or to the employees.
For sure. I mean, a business leader can't say to somebody, look, don't eat 5 McDonald's a day. That comes down to personal choice. We're not going to recommend it, right? We're not going to recommend to someone that's what they do. But it's not up to the businesses to decide. What we should do, though, is be making people aware of kind of the accessibility, the dynamic way in which food's available. I mean, Instagram went wild with food, and Instagram still is wild with food. Glorious food everywhere that inspires people to want to cook differently, to try different things out. And I think that's such a powerful way of enticing people to think differently about the food that they have. So I think businesses can create that environment themselves where they are encouraging their staff to think differently, to look at the variety of choice. that's available, and if they're providing it, to directly influence what's going in. I work with a company who during lockdown, so when we were on lockdown and a lot of staff were working from home, provided lunchtime chefs. They got chefs and did a lunch, like cook along session with the staff, and they were cooking lots of different things. And I thought, what an incredible way to encourage people to be thinking about their food during a period of time where perhaps it's a lot harder to think about that, to motivate yourself, when you're dealing with lots of issues your own self and juggling lots of different things in your life. What a really nice way to do a cook along with somebody and to be inspired by cooking something else. So I thought that was a really great way of a business saying, look, you want to eat 5 McDonald's, eat 5 McDonald's, but actually, come onto our lunch cook along session and learn how to cook something different. So you're learning something new and you're eating nutritious food. It's like a win-win-win.
Absolutely. And that's a very unique perspective. There's a lot of times when you're thinking, of trying new foods or it's something that you do when you're after work, when you're home, you're just looking on Instagram for recipes or something else. But to be able to be inspired like that at the workplace, how amazing is that?
Wonderful, right? I just think it's amazing. Over 300 people came on to these meetings. They got the ingredients in advance so they could, could grab it. Fantastic. Simple dishes, 10-15 minutes to make, nutritious, packed jam full of the right nutrition, given the balanced diet. Brilliant idea.
Absolutely. So, yes, are there other examples of different things that your organizations are doing to kind of infuse that into the workplace?
I see a lot of businesses that will, run specific events that are focused on nutrition. So they might bring in kind of a nutritionist to talk about different aspects of the relationship. There's smoothie days and drinking more water days, and initiatives designed to encourage people to be drinking more water during the day instead of the coffee or the tea. So there are some innovative ways that businesses are thinking about it. Definitely the best ones that I work with are definitely investing kind of, if they've got that cafe and canteen, are reinventing that relationship with food on a more healthier level, and perhaps not just having kind of the pizza and chips that are available all the time. They're giving different options. Vegetarian lasagnas are really lovely. I see them a lot on the menus. So they're thinking differently about what they do, and I think they're the ones that are kind of steering the way in terms of what businesses do when it comes to nutrition. Some companies have kind of a reward and benefits programs, and as part of that you can speak directly to nutritionists as part of that. But I just wonder whether or not you as an individual, if you were struggling with your mental health, whether or not you would consider speaking to a nutritionist, or how that works. Because I know that from if you're struggling with your bowels, for example, or you're struggling with your immune system, you might then be directed to a nutritionist for kind of support and navigating that process. I don't see it so much around that relationship with mental health in that capacity, but there's definitely scope for opportunity for businesses to think differently about it.
Absolutely. Just the sheer variety of things to consider with regard to the food and wellness. So the now, have the businesses, those who are implementing, these different, whether chefs come in or speaking with nutritionists or other events, are they noticing a difference? Are they tracking that at all, or just noticing in some way of improved mental health as a result?
So the ones that have the access to things like different diet-led companies, they're things like Weight Watchers, perhaps, where people give you kind of a list of ingredients and you can use those things, or you can have a list of these and their class is free food, so you can have as many as you like, that kind of mentality around it. Some have relationships with those companies that those run those types of things. So, I think those types of things have their own measurement attached to them. How many people stay on that particular diet, how many people lose weight on that particular diet, or achieve their goals. I think the more perhaps the more kind of the companies that are running things like events doing awareness days and raising education don't have that ability to kind of track the
Mm.
benefits specifically from that. They can measure attendance, how many people attended and what the feedback was from those particular events, but they can't track what benefit that has had directly to those individuals.
Mm.
Because it's a 1 day event, but
Sure.
whether or not, and the likelihood is if you attend one of those days events, you're going to take little nuggets away from it, 3 or 4
Mm.
different things that you go, right, do you know what, that's what I'm going to do with my diet. I mean, I look back on my kind of relationship with food over the years, and when I was struggling with depression myself, and my weight has fluctuated across the years, kind of in line a little bit, I think, with my health and how I felt and how much importance I've placed at the time on my physical health and my nutrition. And I think you learn different things as you go along that works best for you.
Mhm.
So you work out what the foods are that give you the most amount of energy, that suit your body, that really give you the drive and help underpin everything that you're doing. um I know that there's certain things that I would eat before I go for a run, not directly before, but during the day I go for a run, because I know I'm likely to run for a little bit longer and for the whole duration if I eat them. Spinach, for example, is a really valuable ingredient in my diet because it gives me that energy to be able to do some of those things and do those workouts. So you learn some of those things as you go.
Mhm.
And I like to be able to have that choice around what I'm eating rather than kind of someone saying to me, here's your recipe that you need to cook today. I like it as a
Mhm.
guideline, and they say, look, this is what you can create, and I can have a little bit of a play around to create something that looks just as good, but perhaps minus white potatoes, for example.
Absolutely, sure. That kind of, I would think that having, having different events or different access, that kind of sparks creativity, specifically with, whatever they're doing with food, but also being able for them to then utilize those skills in other aspects, maybe perhaps in work or in other situations.
Yeah, it's learning and development, isn't it? And learning and development is kind of one of the 5 things to positive well-being. We talk about people should go on a learning and development program in their life, or learning and development journey, if you like. So running those types of awareness days really does make a difference. And I think food in the last couple of years has just got a little bit more exciting. More people are talking about it. We're kind of having these the vegan wave, and some of those type of things. We're seeing food on the street food. There is lots of fun to be had with food, and lots of different ways to engage with it now. And I think different generations, and certainly the younger generation, I think are really about their food and how much different variety they want, or the types of food, and what that links to in terms of animals, and all of that is wrapped up into it. But learning and development is great, and I think we can learn about food, and those awareness days do help that. And you're right, can inspire creativity, and get people thinking a little bit differently, not only from a work capacity but also from a home life capacity. And if you learn something different about the types of food that you can be eating, and you take that home and you make a dish, and you've got a husband or a wife, and you've got 3 kids, you've just transforming your whole family life with that. So I think it's incredibly powerful in terms of what influence it can have on energizing us, motivating us, playing into our well-being and our mental health, thinking about it from a learning and development perspective, and thinking about how much fun we can have with exploring the food.
Absolutely. Now, you mentioned, it's a lot of them are just 1 day events, so it's, not necessarily tracking it on an individual perspective, but have you seen, have companies noticed, an increase in morale or productivity or things like that? Not necessarily from a 1 day event, but if they were to kind of implement these things into a corporate wellness program of some kind.
Yeah, definitely. So if they're a part of lots of different things that run together, so it might be, the awareness sessions around food and well-being are also run alongside things like physical activity, being more mindful, or perhaps being more present in the moment, thinking about how our leadership engage with our staff, mental health, programs and awareness, so learning a little bit more around the signs and symptoms and how to spot those signs. So I think, as part of that overall package, absolutely it can tie to things like productivity, to absenteeism, to churn, so how many people are leaving the business, your recruitment costs, your performance. They're all measures that we should expect to see a difference in when we are investing in employees in that respect, when it comes down to kind of their energy, their employee engagement, their motivation, their mental health. I think some companies can be very single-minded sometimes with their approach when it comes to mental health and well-being. They go down one particular path. So they might say, okay, look, we're going to get a bunch of people in our company that can spot the signs and symptoms, and they can signpost people to relevant resources externally, where they might be able to get extra help. And I think that's very single-minded of a company to do, because they just won't realise the benefits. And what it doesn't do is showcase kind of the accessibility and variety and the influence that lots of different things can happen in your life that you can be in control of. One of which can be your nutrition, one of it can be your physical activity, one of it can be what you're doing to be more present in the moment. And if people don't know that, and people aren't aware of that, they can't change, and they can't make that difference. And I think that is part of the problem today with so many people who are suffering with poor mental health, is that they don't know what to do, they don't know where to go, they don't know what they could do. I often ask in my workshops, do you know what keeps you mentally healthy? Do you know what keeps you healthy, full stop? And a lot of people don't know that answer. They don't know how to articulate what it is that they do that can keep them healthy. And I think once you've gone through poor mental health, you realise the steps that you have to take to stay healthy, right? So I now know that I do have to do physical activity, and I find different ways in which I enjoy that. I know that I have to eat a balanced diet, and if I eat too many carbs, I'm not going to be very effective the next day. I know that is going to be an impact in. I know that too much worried about the future is gonna make me feel anxious. So I try to bring myself into the present moment, and there are interventions that I have to do for myself that keep me healthy. But so many people just don't realise perhaps what they're doing that's contributing to how they're feeling, but also how to change their mindset out of that, and what they can do to help themselves through it.
Excellent, good point. I love just being awareness in alone is so key to this whole discussion, and the whole offerings of ways to strengthen mental health as well.
Yeah.
So,
And your relationship yourself in life with food might be a difficult one. Your mental illness yourself might be wrapped up in food. We see things like anorexia and bulimia, all of which are mental illnesses that can affect our relationships with food. And sometimes food can be a really social event. You can go out with your friends and your family and enjoy a lovely meal together. Sometimes food is part of that social experience. But if you struggle with that social perspective, or you don't feel like you want to go to those situations, or you're trying to avoid those social events as part of a response to how you're feeling, then you're missing out on those opportunities with your relationship with food. So I do think it ties a lot of things together and can absolutely intrinsically impact lots of other areas.
Sure. Now, in terms of awareness, you mentioned that a lot of employees may not know where to turn, or may not be aware of resources. How is it's probably a kind of a reciprocal type of thing as far as employee awareness and the company themselves helping to make people aware. So how does that work per se? How does the company help to make employees aware of these types of services and activities and things like that? And then, in terms on the other end of the scale, how, the employee themselves, how do they help to kind of stay in tune, I suppose, with different resources?
Yeah, I mean, there's loads of information available now, and with food in particular, there are hundreds of food blogs, right? Different food blogs. So we know there's loads of information, but sometimes we can feel overwhelmed by what everybody's telling us what we should do and shouldn't do when it comes to those things. So some of the great resources that I direct people to: Mind, online is fantastic. The Mental Health Foundation has got some great resources in terms of nutrition. They provide some great resources on food, as well as other things around mental health and well-being and how to promote that. So they're very holistic with how they think about those types of things, and that's accessible globally. So there's some of the resources that I use, and in businesses, I've worked with a company where we wanted to kind of create this knowledge base online that people could access, and it directs people out to the relevant companies that are supporting this content. But if you're thinking about, are carbs good for me, and you type that question in, it pulls up a list of different resources that you can access that are grounded in good research, that have good understanding of the relationship between food and our physical and our mental health. And that is almost like a directory, if you like, where people can really navigate what they're thinking about, and it loop off to different resources online that are accessible. I want to find a nutrition therapist. Okay, here's a list of the ones that have been approved or are recognized or acknowledged, so that you can take a little bit of control over your destiny, if you like. So you're still having that own choice in the matter, but the company are providing things that they know are legitimate, that are valuable, that are well grounded in research, and not just Joe Blogs from down the road who wanted to write about the value of chips.
Sure.
Joe Blogs gets used a lot in my world.
Yes.
He runs a fish and chip shop around the corner, but he is definitely imaginary.
Yes. Now, are these specific relationships that a company has established with different vendors or other companies that they have this kind of a database type of thing?
Yeah. So, for example, I have a number of nutritionists that I would work with as part of an overall plan with a company. So, if I was working with someone around a company with their mental health and well-being strategy, nutrition would be a feature of that. But because I can't articulate intelligently enough around all the nuances, I'm not an expert in that field, I would lean on these people to help me. Now, the company that will interact with me, and I would give them those recommendations of those names. So the bigger companies that do similar things to what I do will do exactly the same. They'll be kind of that front end provider of the service, but ultimately there's people in the background that are providing additional support or different support to what we can do. And I think it's really important that a lot of people kind of in the profession that I'm in, around mental health, recognise their limits of what they can and can't do. And I've seen a few that will go out and talk about lots of variety of different things, as though they're the expert in it. And I'm not ashamed to say that I'm not an expert in some of those areas, because I don't want to give people false information or information that's made based on my own experience with those things, because I know my experience is going to be very, very different, and you have to go through a lot of training to be able to do it. So my view always is with companies is, who are you using, and how have you verified that they are qualified to do the things that you're asking them to do.
Absolutely. So now, what are there any particular trends as far as corporate wellness and how they're dealing with mental health that you're seeing, or that you will be coming to play in the coming months or years, or anything of that
I think
nature?
there's been kind of this wave of well-being novelty fads or trends. Let's call them trends. Where we do lots of different things and we do daily events, and they all have their place and they all add value. We've got to think about, how do we address the actual causes of poor mental health. So I think, in a workplace setting, we're thinking about work overload. We're thinking about the relationships that they have with their leadership. We're thinking about the support that they're getting from the people, their work-life balance, whether they're able to kind of work that out. So I think as we kind of move throughout this pandemic, I think we will start to see more companies thinking about, how do we address the causes of our own influence on poor mental health. So I hope that becomes something of a feature for companies as they think about those things going forward. We're in a very unique time at the moment where businesses are having to think differently because of the response to COVID-19. So many companies are thinking in the right here, right now, how do I support my staff to be safe in work? How do I support my staff with their health and well-being? and for them to be productive and for them to feel as comfortable as they can be. And it's very kind of insular of how they're looking at it right now in kind of context of COVID. But I think as we go beyond that, people will start to be thinking about what can we do to really get to the heart of what's contributing to poor mental health for people and what role do businesses play in impacting that.
Good point. I love just the kind of the long-term approach as well, not necessarily handling just, there are always going to be short-term situations, but in terms of long-term corporate wellness and keeping employees healthy mentally as well as physically.
Yeah, exactly. And some companies will do those kind of one-off situations, one-off events. I see people say, "Oh, we had fruit provided to us last month." And I think, well, what about this month? I mean, I used to work for a company that used to do if we had delivered our targets or our results, they used to do a Pizza Friday. And I look back now and think that was probably one of the worst things we could have done. And it was great, but actually, were we given variety of choice? Were we encouraging from a business perspective on those types of things? And we just weren't. And and 8 years ago it was a bit different. Now, we're in society, we're much more conscious about what we're eating and what's going into our body and what we're putting in. And that old saying of "you are what you eat" type of thing. So we are a little bit more conscious about it now. But I think if you're providing fruit bowls last month, why aren't you providing it every 2 days? It's fruit. It's not the most expensive thing for a business. So I just think rather than kind of doing that intensity of events, it's better to think about what can we do doing every single day. What's the consistency look like? So that people are making different decisions or different choices in their life that ultimately will improve their health.
So it's more of a helping businesses kind of balance, costs versus effectiveness of employee health and what they can do from different food and wellness perspectives.
Yeah, exactly. I always say that businesses aren't responsible for for enforcing a decision on employees about what they do with their own health, but they absolutely have a role in society of creating environments where people can make better choices and better decisions because they have the information available to them to be able to do that. Of course, there's a cost to a business that needs to be done with that, but for businesses, the benefit for them is always going to be that you're going to see it on your absence data. You're going to see the improvement on your attrition. So if you invest in all those things that will add value to the individual, they're also going to add value to you as a business. So why wouldn't you? If you invested, there was a report done by Deloitte that said for every pound that you invest in your employees' mental health and well-being, that you will see a return of nearly 5 times that amount. So every pound.
Wow.
So you spend £1 on me, you get $1 on me, you're getting $5 back. So you do the maths around a mental health and well-being program, and you're thinking about, okay, I'm going to change my cafe and my canteen and what the choices are. I'm going to offer more events around how to make better choices around physical activity and better choices around nutrition and better choices about lifestyle and all of those things. And I'm going to think about what types of conversations I'm having. And when I provide a food day in recognition of our targets and measures, I'm going to put on a little bit of something different to Pizza Friday, and making those conscious decisions, your return on investment becomes significantly higher. And I think if people can see that, that's where businesses then say, okay, look, that makes more sense for us to invest. And the benefit is the businesses see the result. Individuals, happier, healthier, less mental health problems.
Absolutely. Yes, that's fantastic. And you help companies to orchestrate all of that, to put those programs into place. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly that. So, I mean, that's the best thing, is being able to kind of create those programs. And every company's different with where they are in their journey on it. Some have done lots of different things, others haven't done anything. So it's nice to be able to go into different companies and kind of navigate where they are. And everything's built around their own culture and their own environment. Because if it's not built around their own culture and environment, it's never going to be adopted as something that is part of the foundation or becomes part of the foundation of their business. So it's really lovely to be able to see it. And then when you get to the end of it, and you can see where you've come from and the benefits that have been made as a result of that, that's brilliant.
Absolutely. So how can people get in contact with you for more information?
But the best way to get in contact with me is definitely to connect with me via LinkedIn. So just find me, Helen Ginman. I'm more than happy to have a chat with you about anything related to mental health.
All right, excellent. So we will include that in the show notes. And Helen, it's been a fantastic experience talking with you about the great things that are happening in the corporate world to help employee mental health and to strengthen that. That is so amazing and how much of an influence food and wellness has on mental health and the great strides that companies are making with that. That's fantastic.
Thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed chatting to you.
Okay, thanks, Helen.